Built Better, the podcast for home improvement contractors by Modernize Home Services.
So Mark, how are you today? Thanks for being here.
I am great. It is a Friday, so thank you for having me.
That is right. I love recording these podcasts on a Friday because it gives a little extra pep in everybody's step a little bit, you know?
There's a sense of urgency for sure.
Yeah. Me and my wife are actually calling March Wellness March because through COVID, we did not eat like most people did very well. So usually Friday's Pizza Friday. Today is I'm going to eat some asparagus. So I'm ready for that. So.
I'll pass. I did the whole 30 in January, so I'm good.
Did you? Yeah, I've got that COVID 10 or 15 on me, so I'm trying to get rid of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we'll get right into it. We only have a limited time here, so I want to make sure that we maximize your time. It's over 370 locations nationwide. Going back to kind of the COVID era, right, where we're just about to get out, how have you been able to really communicate effectively with that type of scale? And how did things really change for you during the initial wave? And can you talk to me a little bit how you're kind of planning things out as we start to come out of this stuff?
Yeah, so one of the things with our franchisees is we really ourselves on communication, regular communication. And so we've done that in the past over and over and over again. And so what we really did once COVID hit is we kind of stepped our game up to the next level when it came to communication. So we have regular town hall meetings with our franchisees, talk about strategies and operational issues. We had specific meetings around COVID regulations and things you need to be doing to operate your business in a safe manner for your employees and for your customers. And then we had meetings around the PPP loan process with our franchisees. And that seemed like on a weekly basis there, just to making sure they were all positioned well to get through the process. Because at that point, we didn't know how long it was going to last. But we did know that we were an essential business and that we needed to make sure that we continue to operate and keep the customers hot or cold, depending on where you're at in the country through this process. So just a lot of communication, a lot of phone calls and things like that.
Mark, I'm curious. A lot of the listeners today, they can't see your rich background. So for those listening, I mean, Mark, you've been in this industry or the home improvement industry to some extent for the better part of 25, 30 years. That's so
30 years. Yeah.
So, and I'm staring at your LinkedIn profile, but what I find interesting, and I'd love to get your perspective on how you think of communication, because although your background is so rich in the residential, you also dabble in the wellness industry a little bit with the spas and so forth. And so, I don't know, it seems like there's a connection between wellness and communication. And I have to imagine with an organization of your size, it's really important to get the message right. And I also have to imagine it's somewhat challenging when there's so many people at the table across so many time zones. You have so many different locations. How do you think of communication on a larger scale within the organization?
Yeah, so like being in the franchising world for right at 30 years, started off as a franchisee for the first about 12, 13 years of that. And so you learn a lot of things in that process of, one, working with other franchisees and networking with them, and then working with the franchisor. And so I learned those things as a franchisee. And so when I made the move over to the franchisor side, if you will, the one thing that I wanted to make sure that I never lost sight of was how to treat franchisees, how to communicate franchisees, and the things that they go through each and every day in operating their business. And so I tell our franchisees today is like, look, I've been in your shoes. I understand what it's like to run a business. I understand what it's like to be on Friday and trying to make payroll from time to time and just manage all the balls that are in the air. And so when we make decisions at the franchisor level, we take in consideration the franchisee's operations and how it's going to impact them. And then we reach out to franchisees and talk to them about what we're looking at doing and get their buy-in. And so collectively, we're working together to move the brand forward in a positive way. And so we do that in a series of of ways. One, I have a FLT, which is a franchise leadership team, which is made up of 10 franchisees that are voted on by the franchise system that work with me from a strategy standpoint. We meet every month and for an hour or two talk about high-level strategic initiatives. And then, of course, we have some sidebar conversations as well. But that's important because it helps me get the pulse of the franchise system. We have what we call a green team meeting, which is our top 10 franchisees in each one of our brands. And those we meet with those once a month, and they share best practices. Really, we're there just to facilitate the meeting and keep it on point. But they're sharing best practices, and then we're able to learn more things about that to take that back to our other franchisees that are continuing to grow their business. We have franchise business consultants, which reach out to our franchisees on a monthly basis. Of course, the franchisee can talk to the franchise business consultant at any time, but we're talking about high-level things. We're talking about how they're operating through the COVID. We're talking about recruiting opportunities, how to grow their team, how to train their team. We get into the numbers of the business because it's very important for us to, one, grow their top line, and two, make sure they have a very healthy bottom line. So lots of communication, lots of back and forth. And you know, those conversations can be intense at times, right? Because sometimes they're going to hear some things from us they may not want to hear, and vice versa. Sometimes they're going to tell us that we may not be as pretty as we think we are, and we need to step our game up. And I think that makes for a healthy relationship, and I think it allows you to move forward. If everybody's just kind of skipping hand in hand saying, hey, everything's great, well, usually that means everything's not great because you're not talking. So having that open communication allows us to really look at us ourselves and in a way to make the right decisions long term for our franchise systems.
No, that's great. Let me ask you this on a follow-up on that, just because I think communication is, I mean, Dom will know I preach it all the time in the organization. I think it's the single greatest skill we can all possess, right? When you think of how do you get all these franchisees, how do you get them to open up? How do you get them to, I guess, feel like it's a circle of trust, right? Like, we're not going to be honest with people. We're not going to go there. We're not going to want to listen to other people until we feel like we're being listened to. And I love the fact that you said kind of within these groups, there's some best practice sharing. That kind of made me take it as like they're involved, right? We all know if there's some involvement, there's some commitment. But I have to imagine two challenges I'd love you to speak to. One, getting these people to slow down enough where they can start to look at some of this. And then once they slow down, how do you get them to open up and be honest?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from a trust, I mean, you know, there's an old saying that says it takes a long time to build trust, but it's easily given away, right? So one bad decision, everything that you've worked so hard to gain and to build can be torn apart by just one communication. So we talk about trust and a lot and in the town hall meetings. And when I first started this position with 1 Hour back in 2019, that was the first meeting we had, and we talked about trust, we talked about honesty, we talked about integrity, and then we talked about respect and how we were going to treat each other and how we were going to build the relationship. And so my goal is to let my actions speak for themselves from a trust standpoint. And I feel like that if I do the right things, that trust will continue to grow. And as we build that relationship, we'll move a little faster as a company. So we do a very good job of that. And we've found a way to make sure that the franchisees feel secure in communicating with us, right? So when our town hall meetings, they can ask any questions. That's a global question. If they have any individual questions about their specific business, they can reach out to me, our Lance, our vice president, or anybody on the team. The one thing that they know for sure, that is if they call me, I will answer the phone. So if I'm not in the middle of a meeting and my phone rings, I'm going to pick the phone up. I don't let it go to voicemail. And I expect everybody on my team to do the same thing. And so early on in the relationship, it was kind of funny. Some people called and I answered. They're like, wow, you do answer, because my predecessor did not take that time with them. And so it's about building relationships. It's about being a man of your word and doing the things that you're going to say. And so in 1992, when I first became a franchisee, I bought a company and that was in debt, right? That's how I bought the company. And so I took over the debt. And the only way to pay that debt off was to go to each one of those vendors and give them my word of what I was going to do and how I was going to execute my plan and pay that debt off over a period of time, which we did in about a year and a half. And so I go back to that. And that was a lesson that I learned early on, is to be a man of your word, do what you say you're going to do, and everything else will take care of itself. It's when when you try to get shifty, it's going to cause problems. And look, my dad is 85 years old, and he taught me a long time ago, you know what, you've got my last name. You make sure you do the right things every time. And so the corporations that I actually put together, that I own myself as a franchisee, were called DTRT, which stands for do the right thing. And so I believe that's the motto I've lived by to this point, and it's done me well.
Yeah, Mark, it's great to see industry leaders that, have that servant leadership approach. I think in our organization, we always say, hey, if you're not willing to do something yourself, how are you going to ask your people to do it, right? And it sounds like that's kind of maybe a roundabout way, not more directly. That's kind of seems like your philosophy. Are there, and I always love to get little tactical tidbits or little, books to read or anything like that. But it sounds like you've contemplated this a lot and you put a lot of thought into this, maybe beyond, what your father's taught you. Are there any books you've read or anything that you would point our listeners to that you feel is keeping in the spirit with your style of leadership that they can learn from?
Yeah. So I'm a big Zig Ziglar fan. So anything that Zig has done, read, written, spoke, I've tried to listen to and over again. And so many, many times. I love the book, Good to Great, Why Businesses Go from Good to Great. I think that's a great story of understanding how businesses become great and how businesses don't get to the level where they thought they would be. And then the last book that I would talk about is Traction. So we actually go with our franchisees through this process called Traction, which is kind of really laying out a 5-year plan of the business, and all the way down to a 3-year plan, down to an annual plan, down to quarterly rocks, and the things that may jeopardize those plans that are laid out. So we spend a lot of time with our franchisees around that from a budgeting standpoint and a growth. So those are the three books that I would recommend. So
awesome. I appreciate those tips. I wrote those down. I'm gonna, hopefully they'll be via Audible because I can't read books. I go to sleep. I
do the same. I do the same thing.
You talked a little bit about in your town hall meetings. Excuse me. You talked a little bit about in your town hall meetings. You talk about best practices and some learnings and sharing. If you could, is there anything recently that you've learned a little bit that maybe surprised you that came out of these town hall meetings that you'd like to share?
Well, I have to think about that. So, the one thing that around the town hall meetings is, as we've gotten better with those, we have less questions because we're more on the same page. So when we first started, lots of questions that came from the franchisees because, one, I was new. Two, they were new to Authority Brands, which is our parent company, and they were trying to understand all the things and what we were about, what we were trying to get done as a company. And along the way, whether it was software or websites or marketing strategies, our buying power and buying alliances, we've answered those questions along the way and done a very good job. So recently, there hasn't been anything that's been eye-opening to say, okay, well, here's something we need to work on, because we've been communicating so much. We've been open and giving them clarity of what we're doing, which I think gives them a kind of peace of mind that they can kind of go and operate their business without having to worry what their franchisor is doing to interrupt their day-to-day operations. So usually if we're out of line or out of step somewhere, they'll let us know. And usually that comes through my franchise leadership team in those meetings, because those franchise leadership individuals work or talk with franchisees that are assigned to them within their region, and they bring that feedback to the table, and we deal with that during those meetings. We're going through a software I guess, reproduction, if you will, or rewrite right now. And so there's been a lot of conversation around that as far as some things they would like to see, and then some things that we may not have. What I call gaps that we're working on closing those gaps to make sure they can operate better. But all in all, they've been very, very productive meetings.
That's great, Mark. Are these meetings typically just with the leaders of the companies, or to what extent do maybe managers or directors of some of these organizations participate?
So we have a variety. Usually it's either an owner or a GM that come to these particular meetings. A lot of our owners have been in the business for a number of years, and they are not absentee owners, but they're not day-to-day operators either. So they have places and they go, and so they're not active day-to-day. So we deal with a lot of the GMs as well. We have training through what we call Success Academy for other levels of the team. So when you get into CSRs that handle the phones, or your technicians, or your comfort advisors, the salespeople, we have training that's separate for them. Some of that's live, some of that's actually recorded on a learning management system. But we try to make sure we hit every level of all the employees of owners, so they're all working towards a common goal, right? And so I always tell people, look, I want you to know it at this level as an owner or a GM, but you've got to be able to go and communicate that down throughout your team. Because if you only know it and you're the only one that understands the strategy, then and the others don't, then they can't go out and execute it, and you're going to get frustrated. So the one thing is it's the communication has to go throughout the whole team, right? So from me all the way down through my team, all the way down through the franchise owners and employees, to make sure that we can actually deliver the promise to our customers.
I love the fact that you said that, because I was going to lead in with a question that you kind of just tiptoed on. Familiar with the term psychological safety? The idea of teams feeling like they can kind of speak their mind, be free without any sort of consequences within the organization. So think of communication at its most ideal level, right? Like we can be very honest with each other and not fear any sort of consequences necessarily. The idea with that term, though, and you kind of touched on it, I'd love you to elaborate a little bit, is when they've done the studies, and Amy Edmondson and Timothy Clark are some of the pioneers in it, what they came to realize is that it's the behavior of the leader of a team that influences the culture the most, right? So although everybody should be paying attention to it, what they found is that, we are all essentially a company built of teams. And it's the leader of those individual teams' responsibility to kind of set the stage, very much like you were talking about being a role model. They also have to be that role model. And so when you think of communication and kind of maybe passing down some of those principles that need to seep through those individual franchisees, is there any tips that you can give or any advice that you could give to companies listening?
Well, I mean, just from a communication standpoint, is just be honest, right? I just feel like that's the best policy. Sometimes that's going to hurt, right? Because you're going to tell someone something they may not want to hear, or vice versa. But I believe if you start at that point, you can have a professional conversation that is going to be worthy and impactful to both parties. And so if the answer is no, right, or whatever the answer is, then say what it is, and then help them understand why you feel that way. But also at the same time, listen to why they feel the way they do. And I think if you have that type of conversation, I think you can work out any problem or anything that's going on in the business. You can figure it out. It's when you have a combative conversation that's going to go nowhere, and it's not productive for any party. And so I always try to find common ground. Always, I'm respectful. I don't expect people to raise voices in the conversation. We never use bad language, and we're always respectful. And that's one of the things I tell the franchisees and I tell my teams, like, look, we're going to be respectful to each other. We may not agree on a certain subject from time to time, but we're going to work together to find a common ground and a common platform that we can move forward. And in most times we do that, right? And so I had a conversation yesterday with the franchisee who which turned in a 10-minute conversation, turned into an hour, but it was a great conversation, right? He told us how he was feeling about a couple things, and we told him our position, and we talked about it. And at the end of the day, it was worth the conversation. And he's like, I apologize for taking so much time. And I'm like, no, that's what we're here for, right? We've got to communicate to understand how you feel and how we feel, so we can move together arm in arm.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. Just how you manage conflict is really essential to how a business can kind of be self-reflective and grow from learning from that conflict. I mean, can you think of anything that comes to mind that you've had in flushing out some of that conflict? Maybe it's respectful conflict, essentially, but when there's problems, like how did you kind of attend to that problem, and then how did that permeate throughout your organization? Is there anything that just pops up when you think about that?
So, I mean, if you have a franchisee that has a concern and that's bothering them, then let's get it out on the table. And sometimes that may be multiple conversations. Sometimes I can't solve that situation right there on the spot. I may need to get more information to be able to give them better information so they can make a better decision. And so whether it's one conversation or 5 conversations, we're committed to working with our franchisees to resolve any challenge they have in their business. And so, and we work very hard to make sure, because we have a vested interest in their success. And so whether they're having a challenge around the operations side or the marketing side or recruiting or just the numbers themselves, we're going to work with them to make sure we get that. If they're having a challenge with a strategy that we have, right, that doesn't really maybe not fit neatly within their business model, then we try to help them understand what that picture looks like for not just them, but for the betterment of the entire system. And so sometimes being part of a team, someone has to sacrifice for the good of the team, even though it may not fit their business model perfectly. And so we have those types of conversations from time to time. And usually I can't think of a time we haven't been able to come to a resolution and be able to move forward. But again, sometimes those conversations take, many, many times of going over it and looking at the details. And, and here's the thing, if we're wrong, then there's nothing wrong with admitting you're wrong, right? And make a better decision with better information. And I think by doing that, you build trust, you build respect. And it shows that from an integrity standpoint, you're trying to do the right thing for their business and for the system. So I think that works well for us.
Now, Mark, most of the listeners aren't going to be in your position in the sense that they don't have maybe franchisees. They're not part of an organization like that, but they may have, obviously employees or direct reports, teams of people. Some of the clients are contractors are going to have multiple locations, which I think there are some similarities. Do you see any difference in maybe your strategies in communicating within your organization? Do you see differences in how maybe a contractor may operate with a second location that he owns that's farther away, or is communication essentially the same regardless?
For me, it's the same. Right. And I mean, you get to know people's personality and their profiles and how you can talk to them, what you can say, what you can't say. And that's just part of being an individual. But pretty much they're the same for me. Right. And so and the biggest key is listening, and which is the hardest thing to do in any conversation, because a lot of times you have all this information, you have all this knowledge that you want to share with the franchisee of how you can help them. But if you're not listening, you're going to miss the key points. So the one thing that we talk about internally is really slowing down and listening to a franchisee of what they're feeling, what they're talking about, and then how to help them and try to get that resolved in an easier way. So, but listening is going to be key.
Yeah, they say, right? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's it.
Lots of listening involved. No, I appreciate that.
Hey, Mark, how many new franchisees do you typically bring on in the course of a year?
So we go by territories. Last year, I think we brought in like 54 territories, new territories. And so one of the things, our Authority Brands, of course, our parent company, purchased the three brands that I oversee, which is 1 Hour Heating and Air, Mr. Sparky Electric, and Benjamin Franklin Plumbing. And so our goal is to grow those brands. So we are aggressively growing our system, adding new franchisees, and just are getting ready here on Monday to launch a new conversion plan for existing independent contractors who are looking to partnership with a brand. So we're excited about that. We feel like that's going to be a home run for us in 2021.
Oh, that's phenomenal, Mark. Yeah, you talked a little bit about the learning programs and how that. I'd like to understand a little bit. If I'm a contractor and I want to get involved with your organization, like what should be the next steps, and what are the typical challenges to ramping up these franchisees?
Yeah. So one of the things, so we have we call a Sure Start program, which anytime a new franchisee comes on, whether it's an independent contractor converting to our brand, which is what we have majority of the time, or a entrepreneur who has decided to leave the corporate world and kind of control their own destiny, we put them in a Sure Start program. They have a individual that basically holds their hand for the first 6 months. They're also assigned a permanent franchise business consultant that is there for that 6 months as well as our marketing manager that helps them from a marketing standpoint. So we have over 150 checklist items that they have to go through. That usually takes a little less than 90 days from start to finish before they're able to go in and start operating under our brand, right? So there's a lot of things that we want to make sure of from a system standpoint, that they're using our system the correct way, especially independent contractors converting because they've done business in a certain way for so many years. We're going to teach them just a little bit different way of doing business that we think works and has worked very successful for us over the years and really helps improve their profitability.
Right. So when you say system, so are we talking, everybody's on a main CRM system, or is it just more of a process system?
Well, that's a great question. It's really everything. So first of all, from a system standpoint, it's the operations system. So we have our operations manual. And for me, operations is everything from the time the phone rings to the time you put the money in the bank and in between. So how do we answer the phone? What's our scripting look like? What's our conversion rate of booked calls? Once we book a call, how does it go over to dispatch? And what happens in dispatch, and how is it basically sent out to the technician? When the technician arrives at the house, what are they going to be doing at the home? What's the sales process? How do we price out the products? How do we create a happy customer, wrap that in a bow and get it back to the office and invoice it? And the second is marketing. So, how do we go out and get new customers? And then how do we retain those customers long term? What do we do with that? What are our marketing strategies? So that's all part of a system, right? From a management standpoint, which is the human side of the business, is how do you go out and build a team? How do you recruit? How do you train those people? How do you instill a culture of success into them and then have them embrace our systems? And then the last is the finance, which is know your numbers, know your numbers. And so we want to make sure we know everything about the numbers with our franchisees. So collectively, we can't be at their locations all the time. But the way we can help manage their business and give them feedback is looking at the numbers. And so we track everything from number of calls to book calls to closing rates to average invoices to budgets to P&Ls to line items. So you've got those, and then additional systems there. We have our own proprietary software that we have to install. And then we have our buying alliance through BuyMax, which really gives our franchisees an advantage over independent contractors. You're collectively thinking about over, 350 different franchise owners, over 800 territories nationwide. Collectively, when you're starting to negotiate pricing with vendors, we definitely would going to have a little bit more strength than an independent contractor that's doing $50,000 a year in purchasing.
That was a great overview. As you first started talking Dom, I don't know if you got the same thought. I was like, man, Mark, we're in the same business here. Like, I've got 1,000 contractors on our platform that we're trying to tell them how to answer the phone and call people back quicker and build out their whole lead tech. But then you kept going and you started getting into all the operational stuff, which makes complete sense. And I was like, man, Dom, he's got a harder job than we got, because now he's got to help him run the whole business. The question I have for you, Mark, is, as humans, and it's so hard to change habits. Like, it's hard to break the bad ones. And I have to imagine, and you hinted on it, like you are taking in people into the family that have a way that they've gone about things in their life. And you have to deconstruct that and then build a better one. And I just know how hard it is for me to put on a different color shirt in the morning. I just go to the same spot in the closet, and whatever shirt's there is the one that goes on. And so how do you address just that it's not easy breaking habits? How do you deal with that?
So it's we talk about that, and we have what we call a boot training, which is our basic operational training that a new franchisee goes to. That's 1 week long, and we talk about that on day one, and then we talk about it again on the last day on Friday. And so it was kind of like eating the elephant, right? So you can't eat the elephant at one bite, right? You got to eat it a little bit at a time. And so we talk about how to go about doing that, how to change their habits over a period of time. And we give them a process. We have a question that we make them write down and put on their wall. And so every time they're going to be making a decision, they have to ask themselves this particular question. And if they are doing the right things with our systems, so we have those 4 areas, and they're picking 2 items out of each of the 4 areas. So they're working on 8 items at a time. Some of those items may take weeks or months to complete. But if they're following our systems analysis checklist, if they're asking themselves the right questions of what they're doing or not doing within the system, it will identify exactly where they need to work on and pay the most attention to. And then they can start kind of taking little bites of the elephant along the way. And so that's the way we teach it. And it works.
Yeah, I think the common theme from what I'm hearing is that you couple communication with a pretty clear and concise structured approach, then you could scale up pretty quickly. Does that sound about right?
Yes. So you can scale very fast if you're doing the right things and being disciplined, right? So we talk about discipline in their business, making disciplined decisions, handling the money from a discipline standpoint. It's all, the great thing about franchise is that, number one, you're never out there by yourself. So anytime you have a challenge or question, a concern, you have 350 other brothers and sisters that you can reach out to and talk to. And usually you will find that answer. And that's the great thing about franchising. And so when I was a franchisee, and even today, the value of the people that mentored me as a franchisee and helped me along the way to make better decisions, more disciplined decisions. And so we really encourage the networking within our system.
Yeah, that's the idea of discipline. I'm going through with my wife financial discipline at this point, right? They don't teach that stuff in high school. They don't teach you what the FICO score is and how to manage your credit, your age of history, all that good stuff. So that part is.
I give a shout out to Dave Ramsey.
Seriously, it's interesting. So over the course of my 20s, I started to learn those things, and now I'm teaching my wife. It's fun. So, but that is a big part of it. That really resonates with me, the discipline part of it. It's kind of like similar to sports. I think everybody, even if you're not a particularly great athlete, you should play a sport, or you should be in some type of organization that teaches you discipline, right?
Yep.
And because
and teamwork. Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, we run our teams here. Everybody has some kind of experience in sports, or be it karate, jiu-jitsu, or something like that, where you have to maintain discipline. That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Oftentimes see contractors is kind of like the Wild West sometimes. It's just we're just doing stuff because we've always done it, and right.
That's it. So there's 2 things we talk about on that first day. Is 1 is keep an open mind, and 2, don't resist change. So change is good.
Yeah. Do you have any people that come to mind, franchisees maybe that are you would consider success stories in that you can speak to?
Oh, I got bunches of those, right? So it's so we have some pretty large operators, which like I said, I've been in the business for a number of years, and I've seen big operators. But when I first started here and got to know everybody, we have some what I consider large operators, right? And I'm talking $20 million plus operators, and which is unusual in most cases if you're not a regional type players. We're just talking about very individual people. So, but I've got people all over the country that operate their business at a very high level, and from Florida to Virginia to South Carolina down to Texas, and in Arizona, in California, it's in Louisiana. So it's hard to single out anybody, but I mean, the one thing that I have a great deal of respect for with my franchisees in the system is they want to grow, they want to do the right things, and they're really focused in growing their business. And when you look at these people and they're doing the revenue they're doing and the double digit profits that I see, it's amazing. So and they're all about soaking up knowledge. So it's like they figured it out, but they want to get better, so they want more. Right? How do I get to the next level? How do I squeeze out another half point and on my P&L? So it's keeps me young and happy.
That's great. Well, I know you can't single out your favorite child. That makes complete sense. As you well know, I said I live in Sonoma County. You have a location right up the road from me. I know Paul Bigham well.
Yep.
I've been in his office. I've known him for probably about 6 years. Great company. He actually did some work for a friend of mine. I had him install my AC unit, so I intimately know the business. We work with those guys, and yeah, I think the thing that I like the most about, or at least the experience that I've had with one of your 1 hours, is you're right. It's that appetite to do better, and you don't see that in a lot of companies. And I mean, everybody I think has that the words, I want to be bigger, I want to do more. But at the end of the day, you actually got to start doing those things. And so, from the tech showing up at the house to them working, I want to say that night they pulled it all day. I think they left at like 10:30 to make sure that the system was operational before the next day. And then every time I meet with Paul and his team, they do a great job. So little biased, but he's also up the road from me.
No, so Paul, and that operation's a great operation with 1 hour and Mr. Sparky. And we have our largest Benjamin Franklin is in San Francisco in the Bay Area, and Dan Gagne. And so Dan is, he's been stuck in Costa Rica for the last year and a half, so can't come home. So, but his business has actually grown while he's been away. So his GM, John Rossi, and business partners done a great job in keeping that business afloat. We have Dustin Hosty in Texas, who is taking his 1 hour and just done phenomenal things. His father owned that business for many years. And he's taking that business to the next level. And we just had a nice meeting with him, and from a buying standpoint, and he's very happy. He's been able to do some things to drive some more money to the bottom line just from buying through Bimax. So we have Ron Williams that's over on the East Coast. It's a multi-brand franchisee, Todd Kletz, who is one of our biggest 1 hours in our system, who has operations in Virginia and Tennessee. We have a former employee in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, that went back and purchased his father's business and has tripled that business in a matter of 6 years. So when you get to see those types of success stories and see how it impacts not only their lives personally, but the people that work with them as well, it makes this job very, very, very rewarding.
Yeah, it's also really exciting. I spent in Modernize, I spent probably the better part of 3 years really learning the HVAC industry. So meeting with all the manufacturers, all the franchises, every organization. I won't pretend I'm an expert, but Dom's seen my crazy mind maps. And, there's what I always found really encouraging about the HVAC industry. And I realize you represent more brands than just heating and air conditioning. Although we're a little bit more intimate to that one, is the need out there. There are so many in it. And I realize like the bigger the company doesn't mean always the better, but I mean, there are $100 million plus HVAC companies in the country.
Yep.
There are in almost every major metro that I can see, there's at least a 10 million, maybe several 20, 30. I mean, George Brazil and Parker and Sons and Orangutan and Jim and, all those guys. And so I think that's really encouraging. Like the need for the services is really there. And so I've always kind of equated HVAC to, and, apologize my, comment here, but it's like kind of shooting fish in a barrel, right? Like if you've got a good system when those extreme temperatures kind of peak, like you can gobble up as much as you want, provided you have the system for them, the capacity to handle it.
Yep.
So I just think it's so encouraging.
I think I agree with that. So you hear from a lot of contractors today is one of the biggest challenges they have is finding enough people to grow their business. And so that's one of the things that we really work on with our franchisees is to make sure they have a good recruiting program in place to grow their team to meet demand. And then once you do that, then you've got to be able to educate the customer and do the right things once you're in the home. And so some people take that time to do that. And I think they're rewarded in growth with their business. Other people are rushed. And at that point, I think they actually shortchange themselves and their customer in the process.
Yeah, one of the things that I've, excuse me, one of the things that I've noticed about just folks in the HVAC industry, and the rest is just the quality of the individual. Honestly, I've been super impressed with everybody I've interfaced with, from the marketing side, at least, and operational side. I mean, just it seems like folks get into the industry because they want to do well and service the homeowner with quality product and quality service. I think where it does fall off is that we have the best intentions of going into that, but sometimes we don't challenge the homeowner to like think about what their really needs long-term are and recontemplate what they should be doing. Is there anything that you can speak to where you've kind of done that for the homeowner and tried to really service them, not just being a nice guy, but by really being nice to them, in fact, getting them what they really are going to need and what's the best thing for them?
Yeah, so we have a very defined process that we have our technicians go through from a training standpoint, and it walks them through the whole process from the time they show up to the home to the time they leave, each step of the way, what they're supposed to be doing, what they're supposed to be presenting, how they're presenting that, how to educate the customer, how to get them involved in the process, and move forward. So we spend a lot of time around that. We talk about past, present, future aspects of the sales process with them. And so, I feel like our guys are very well trained when they go out there. And we have a program called You Win, which we have, I believe, the best guarantees in the business. And so we explain that process and that program to our customers. And which gives them peace of mind that they would want to do business with a company like ours. Being such a large organization, we're able to do some of those things from a backing standpoint that kind of gives the customer that feeling that they're dealing with a large company that's reputable and can stand behind some of the things that we warranty. And so we're proud of that fact and are going to continue to build on those warranties here in the near future.
Hey, Mark, without digressing too much, I'd be curious of your thoughts on kind of the whole home energy system. I mean, it just seems like it's woven so much through what you guys do. I'm fairly familiar with Paul. I know he's kind of dabbled in solar. Obviously, Mr. Sparky, solar. I mean, you can kind of see where installation comes in and like there's this kind of whole home need. When you guys think of your brands, where does this kind of whole home automation, energy efficiency come in at all?
Yeah, so one of the things we launched in 2020 was more smart home technology, which allows us to be able to, I guess, predict, if you will, or potential problems in the home before they happen, which prevents people from going down, losing their HVAC system for a period of time. So unfortunately, COVID hit. And so we've done okay in that initiative, but we haven't done as well as I would hope to, because we've been fighting other things, trying to just operate and continue meeting demand. So we're going to be having a meeting in October of this year, face to face again with our franchisees. That's the plan as of today. And so we're going to relaunch that campaign and program and work with our franchisees. So when you're talking about being able to analyze all the electrical circuits in a home, or all the HVAC operations, and even from a water heater to turning a valve off at the water meter if there's a leak, things like that. That kind of technology is been there for a number of years. Just the industries as a whole have not embraced it that well. And so we're going to spend a lot of time embracing that, because we think that's the future of owning our customer, and going to spend a lot of time around that.
Does the idea of solar or like battery storage at all come into your thoughts?
So solar, we're still looking at. So that's one of those things. It's kind of like back in the day of when you first had a VCR, right? So you had a VCR, and everyone's like, what's a VCR? And then everybody got one. The next thing you know, they were out and there was a DVD. But when they first started out, they were $1,000, and then they dropped down to like $99. And so solar hasn't followed that yet path as far as cost. And so when you look at homeowners and trying to educate homeowners, the homeowners are still trying to wrap their arms around what is solar. Why is it the process so difficult? Why is it so expensive? And so I think the costs are going to have to come down a little bit from a solar standpoint for the consumer to embrace it. I love it. Actually, I've gone through that process myself at my home, just to try to understand it and educate myself. And so I think it's the future, but I think we're still a few years away from there.
Yeah, I actually just went through that process this past week. As you know, in Texas, we're affectionately calling snowpocalypse.
Yeah.
So I actually just signed with a solar company, and it is actually, over the last 5 years, the costs have come down like incredibly. And I think the next step is for the cost of batteries as we scale up battery technology. Sure. So
yeah. So your battery can actually cost more than the solar panels. If it's pretty expensive.
Yeah. So if you get two batteries, basically that's the solar system. So, and if you get two batteries at this point, depending on what manufacturer, but you talk about the leading manufacturer right now, you can basically run 3 to 5 days without power from charged up from your solar system.
Yep.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah.
That would have helped us out.
Sure. Our generator sales are up right now. So there's a lot of people looking to put generators in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The issue with the generators, though, typically is like if there's a run on gas, generator doesn't work, right? So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there for people to consider, I think. We're kind of starting to run up on time here, so I want to make sure that we do be respectful of that. But one of the things about the HVAC industry that is different from like an exterior business, a window replacement, like most of the time your Windows installers, unless it's a sole proprietor, they're not going out and selling, right? And with HVAC, it's a lot of times your technician is tasked with doing that, going through the whole sales process. I mean, from your experience, how challenging is that to take somebody that that has to be able to install and also has to be able to guide the homeowner to what they really need? Because sometimes those skills aren't completely transferable, right?
Yeah. So I don't believe that we have that big of a challenge with it, right? So we spend a lot of time training technicians. So when you look at our learning management system, we have multiple classes on training, right? And our top class is what we call $2 million seller, which is getting a technician to sell $2 million of install and service in a year's time. And so we haven't had a lot of challenge. We do have some what we call comfort advisors, which are salespeople that may come in if we're out on a service call, and they may come in to do a second opinion. with the customer. But overall, our technicians do a pretty good job of that process. But we spend a lot of time and effort on that. We teach our franchisees that they train on a weekly basis. Some of our larger franchisees, they train every day on some part of our system. And so when you're doing those types of things, repetition wise, it gets good habits in place. And so they go out and do what they do. So we haven't had that challenge from our standpoint.
I'm not going to pretend I'm going to speak so intelligently, but hopefully you'll catch me here, Mark. I know that labor has been such a big challenge in almost every construction industry we can think of, especially for the bigger companies. You ask them the top 3 problem, it's get leads and it's get skilled technicians, if you will. I have heard, and I think I've seen some like virtual technology, we'll call it like glasses, if you will, that allows to like a more senior technician maybe to be back at home base, but train a more rookie person. Like, can you talk a little bit about what you see as some up and coming technologies that may support that?
Yeah, so we have a relationship with Interplay, and that provides that technology to our franchisees already. We launched that in late 2019. And so we already have a lot of our franchisees embracing that. So use that as a recruiting tool to say, hey, we'll help you grow from an experience standpoint based on the training that we have. We also use that as a tool to make sure that people that come to us can do basic functions of what they need to do in their job. So that's kind of a test in their interview process. And so we continue to add classes to Interplay with our franchisees. In fact, I just got a video from a franchisee in Louisiana that videotaped their Interplay training. So, but yeah, that's any kind of technology like that is virtual reality is going to be heavily factored into our strategies moving forward.
Well, it is 2021. I love to hear that.
So, it is.
I'm such a tech nerd, so I'll try anything. So I'd love to
Well,
get
just make sure you're sitting down when you do it, because I tried it when I first tried it. It can get you a little dizzy.
I bet. Yeah, it's like disorienting. Yeah. When the VR goggles first came out, where you put your phone in the thing, and I had my wife try it, and we did a roller coaster thing, and she basically fell down. It was hilarious. That was just don't put homeowners through that. Mark, that's just about, we're coming up on our time here, but is there anything else that you want to kind of share about, and maybe a contractor wants to get into being, a franchisee? Like, any wisdom that you would impart onto them?
So I would, if I was talking to an independent contractor, I would just ask them a question. Are you where you want to be in your business today versus where you set out 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Are you where you want to be? Are you building your company? Are you building wealth? Are you stuck in a job that does the same thing repetitively over and over every day, that depends strictly on you to be there every day, that you haven't had a vacation in 2 or 3 or 4 years? And at the end of the day, you have a job. And is that what you wanted when you started your business? If the answer is yes, that's what I wanted, then great. Continue to do what you're doing. If you want something different, if you want something more than just a job, if you want a way of life, if you want some freedom, if you want to grow a brand and something that you can build and sell at the time that you decide that you want to retire, then I would suggest to look at one of our brands, our franchise brands. And here's the basic thing. And I never really thought about it this way until I heard it from another person in the franchising world. And you think about your habits today. You think about if you're going to travel from Phoenix to Albuquerque, or from Dallas down to Houston or to Tennessee, wherever you may travel, and think about your stops along the way. Think about your decisions along the way. When you stop at a hotel, you stop at a franchise. When you stop to eat, 9 out of 10 times, you stopped at a franchise. Franchising is a powerful business. And people select franchise businesses to go to from a service standpoint because they understand in the predictability of what we're going to be able to deliver versus somebody that's independent. They know that they're going to get a certain experience with a franchise business because we collectively work together across the system. And so that's very powerful. If you think about your customers today and how they think and how they make their decisions, they're choosing predictability. They're choosing an experience they know they can depend upon. And that's why franchising is so powerful. And if you're looking for that, give me a call.
Well, with that, Mark, I think it's a good place to end. But hey, really, really appreciate you coming on the show today. I learned a lot. I can't wait to review this and get into some of the details I might have missed. So, hopefully we can swing back around and have you on again. But thank you so much for your time today.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Y'all have a great day and have a great weekend. Stay safe.